99% never learn why we suffer. Buddhism reveals it. We all encounter pain in life. Even when we were first born, coming out into the world was a painful experience. Then there were more pains from day to day, and nobody could explain them to us. As the Buddha said, our first raw reaction to pain is bewilderment. Why is this happening? Then there's a desire to find a way out. You search for someone to help. Is there anyone who knows a way to put an end to this pain, this suffering? This is why we reach out to other people. If we had no pain, we could be perfectly content to be by ourselves. It's because of pain that we seek other people out. Basically, we look for somebody who knows. The problem is that because we're searching with bewilderment, we don't really know who we can rely on, who we can't. So we go through life picking up ideas. As we develop language, as we listen to other people, observe other people, we pick up ideas on how to deal with pain, physical pain, mental pain. Some of them work, some of them don't. When they don't work, we keep on searching. So instinctively, we're looking for 1. Someone who knows how to put an end to pain. 2. Someone who's truthful, willing to tell us the truth about what they know. And 3. Someone who's compassionate, willing to share their knowledge with us. People of integrity. When the Buddha talks about one of the requisites for gaining awakening, he starts with people like that. People who know, people who tell the truth, and people who are compassionate. His tests for what he calls people of integrity include the test that you observe this person very carefully, and you see if this person would try to get somebody to do something that was not in that person's best interests. If he would, you wouldn't want to take this first person as a teacher, because it shows that he or she doesn't have compassion. But if everything that person tells you is for your own best interest, then you can trust that person's compassion. The next question is, would this person claim to know things that he or she didn't know? And again, if you see that he or she would make claims like that, you realize you can't trust that person. You want somebody who's truthful. Then you want to see how deep that person's teachings are. If they give you new insights into your own mind, it shows that that person knows something you don't know. So that's ideally what you look for as you go through life. And the Buddha says he's providing that kind of person for you. He himself trained himself to be knowledgeable, truthful, and compassionate. And he trained others to be knowledgeable, truthful, and compassionate as well. This is why we have the Sangha, all the monastics he trained and who have trained one another since then to keep these traditions alive. But as the Buddha pointed out, to recognize a person of integrity, you have to have some integrity too. You may not have the knowledge you're looking for, but you do want to develop the qualities of being truthful and compassionate. To begin with, you're truthful both to yourself and with other people. This is why when the Buddha was teaching his son, the very first thing he talked about was how important it was to be truthful. If you want to benefit from the practice, you have to start out as someone who's always going to tell the truth. As he said, you don't even tell a lie, even in jest. In other words, you don't tell a joke that's basically a lie. You have to make sure that whatever you say is in line with the truth as you know it. Now, you may be deceived about things, but as long as you speak in line with the truth as you know it, you're developing the right quality. Then, of course, to gain knowledge, you want to figure out where to really don't know yet. As for the quality of compassion, you realize if you harm other people, whatever happiness you gain is not going to last, because those people are not going to tolerate being harmed. If your happiness depends on harming them or their loved ones, they're going to try to destroy your happiness. So you have to take their happiness into consideration as well, and really want other beings to be happy. So you have to develop the qualities of integrity inside. You see this especially as you meditate. In Thailand, they'll often ask people who are meditating, "What do you see when you meditate?" hoping that you'll tell them about lottery numbers or maybe visions of divas. But as Ajahn Fuang pointed out, the best thing to say is, "I see my defilements." In other words, I admit to myself what's going wrong in my mind. When you admit your faults to yourself, then there's hope for you. You realize that there's something wrong, something that needs to be corrected, and you're willing to correct it. That's the quality of truthfulness you want. The same with compassion. You work on what you know will be for your long-term welfare and happiness. And for it to be long-term, you have to take the welfare and happiness of others into account. If you're compassionate in this way, the Buddha says it's also the beginning of wisdom, because wisdom starts with the desire to know what actions will lead to long-term welfare and happiness. In this way, these qualities of truthfulness and compassion come together to make you wise. So as you meditate, you have to remember, you're not here just for the techniques. We can talk about staying with the breath. What happens when the mind wanders off from the breath? You bring it right back. The how-to part is a necessary part of the meditation, but there's also the why. What are your values? And how honest are you in maintaining those values? I've known a lot of cases where people meditate and they start getting visions. Visions of what other people are doing. Visions of divas. In the beginning, their visions may be correct, but if they go around bragging about them, trying to use their knowledge to impress other people, their knowledge tends to turn on them. They start getting false things mixed up in what they see. And because their intentions are not really all that honest, they can't tell the difference. So your best guide to keeping yourself safe, both as you're looking for someone to take as an admirable friend and as you're working with your own practice, is try to be as truthful as possible. And think about compassion in terms of the long term. You're here not to impress other people. You're here because you've got a problem inside. If you can solve that problem, then you can really help other people solve theirs. The mind is causing itself suffering and it doesn't know why. Everything we do, say, and think is for the purpose of happiness, and yet we turn around and do things that make us very unhappy. Why is that? That's the problem we're here to solve. It's good that we have the time to do that. All too many people go through life and never have the time to sit down and look at their own minds, even though this is the big problem driving us all, making us suffer. Here the Buddha is offering us an opportunity to learn how to understand the problem, and, in understanding it, you can put an end to it. You look for people of integrity, and you also try to develop qualities of integrity in yourself. In that way, you keep yourself on the right track. A happy tradition. When the Buddha taught people how to put an end to suffering, he never asked them first, "Do you deserve to suffer?" You look at the people he taught. In many cases, there were people whose karma was such that they were going to die soon. But he'd teach them how to become awakened anyhow. Even his foremost disciple, Ven Moggallana, had some pretty bad karma in his past that was going to follow him all the way into this lifetime. But again, the Buddha taught him how to become awakened, so he wouldn't have to suffer from that karma. There's a case of King Ajatasattu, who killed his father, King Bimbisara. One night he comes to see the Buddha and asks him some questions. The questions are kind of dumb, but the Buddha takes pity on him. He teaches him one of the longest discourses in the canon, one of the most complete pictures of the path of practice. Now Ajatasattu's karma was such that he wasn't going to be able to understand the teaching, and he had a bad destination after this lifetime. But the Buddha still taught him in a lot of detail, seeing that would benefit him. At the very least, he admitted the fact that he'd killed his father. He had remorse around that. As the Buddha saw, this teaching would save him a lot of suffering, in spite of all the pains he was destined to experience. He'd eventually come out and get awakened in a much later life. So, the question of deserving or not deserving to suffer, deserving or not deserving to be happy, never comes up. Even when people have bad karma, the Buddha teaches them how not to suffer from that karma. Think back on his analogy of the salt crystal, or the analogy of the stolen goat. If a poor person steals a goat, he goes to jail. A rich person steals a goat, he may pay a little fine, nothing much, and it certainly doesn't make an impression on him, because he has so much more money to spare. It may not sound fair, but what the Buddha is illustrating is the principle that if you make your mind wealthy in skillful qualities, then whatever past bad karma you have, when it comes to hit you, it's not going to make much of an impact. To make your mind wealthy, you develop the Brahma Viharas: goodwill for all, compassion for all, empathetic joy for all, equanimity for all. You train your mind not to be overcome by pleasure, not to be overcome by pain. You develop your virtue, you develop your discernment. So there are skills that can enable you not to suffer, no matter what your past karma is. He's giving you power, For a lot of us, that takes a lot of getting used to. Either the culture of our families or the culture of the religion we were raised in told us to have a low opinion of ourselves, in that they make a virtue out of humility, out of low self-esteem. But they're basically putting you in a position of powerlessness. You have to wonder why. You read about God in some of the monotheistic religions, and he doesn't sound very happy. He seems to be pretty miserable, and he takes his misery out on other people. Some of us have had parents like that. If that's the background we're coming from, we have to learn to unlearn it, to learn that happiness is something that is available. The path is there, and it's open to anyone who wants to follow it. No questions asked. Now, some people, because of their past karma, are going to have a more difficult time than others. But that doesn't mean they're hopeless. Simply that it's going to take longer. You have to learn how to talk to yourself in a new way. This is why we develop a new sense of self to go along the path. If you've been trained to think that yourself is incompetent and undeserving, you have to learn not only to talk to yourself, to convince yourself that, yes, you can do this path, but you also have to master some of the skills that go with self-esteem to support your self-confidence. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha has you practice generosity and virtue as a foundation for meditation. When you look at your actions, you can see that there are good things you've done, bad things you've avoided. There's a sense of joy that goes with that, a sense of strong self-worth, so the question of deserving never comes up. Every time they use the word deserving in the Pali Canon, it's reserved for arahants. In fact, that's what the word arahant means, deserving. It's related to an old custom from the Vedas, that when they would have a sacrifice, they would make a cake. I don't know what went into the cake, but they called it the sacrificial cake. After the sacrifice was done, you wanted to find somebody who was worthy to partake of that cake. As the Buddha said, there's no one more worthy than the arahants to receive that cake, or to receive gifts in general, because when they receive a gift, they're not placed into debt to anybody. And those who give gifts to arahants gain a lot of merit, but the ability to become deserving like that is open to anybody, including you. Think about that. We read about the noble ones, and they seem so far away. We have to remember that they came from a position very much like ours. They had their defilements, they had their greed, aversion, and delusion. Sometimes we read the biographies of the Ajahns, and it sounds like they were born arahants, but that's not the case. They had a lot of defilements they had to fight against. On top of that, they came from a society in which they were very low on the ladder. You read some of the teachings of Ajahn Mun that some of his students wrote down. A lot of them have to do with reminding his students, you're a human being, you've got all 32 parts of your body, you've got all you need in order to gain awakening. The fact that you're a human being means that you're in the best position for gaining awakening. So whatever your status in society, whatever ideas have been placed in your head about your value, either through your family or through your past religion, you've got to shake them up. Remember Ajahn Mun's teaching. The fact that you're a human being means you're ready. You're in the ideal position to take on the practice, to follow it through. His students were mainly sons and daughters of peasants in a very poor part of Thailand, yet they were the ones who revived the practice. In a lot of cases in the canon, people from very low positions in society who thought very little of themselves found that they too could practice. They too could gain awakening. There's one story of a leper who was taught by the Buddha. Soon after he was taught, he gained the Dhamma eye and then he died. He was reborn as a Deva, and as a Deva, he outshone all the other Devas in heaven. That's a story that's told in one of the Udanas. There's a story told in another sutta where the Devas are kind of snooty. Here's this Deva they feel is undeserving. He outshines them. They're pretty upset. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it astounding? They say in a sarcastic way. But as the case often happens in the heavens, the more the other Devas get upset, the brighter the Deva who's being looked down upon begins to shine. So no matter how much people have been looking down on you or getting you to look down on yourself, the path is open. All you have to do is learn how not to fall back into your old patterns, thinking that humility is a good thing or low self-opinion is a good thing. Humility in the sense of realizing you've got defilements that you've got to work on. That's good. But humility in the sense that you're incapable of doing this without outside help, that's not good. Learn some skillful humility and some skillful pride. We have traditions that tell us not to take any pride in the fact that we've done good, that somehow all the good we've done has to be attributed to some higher power working through us. Again, that comes from a very unhappy tradition. The Buddhist tradition is a happy one, where everybody deserves to find true happiness. The Buddha was happy, and he wanted to spread his happiness around. That's the figure we bow down to, the person we take refuge in, because he wants us to be happy too.